Welcome to American Education FM, everybody. I'm Dr. Sean Brooks. Welcome back, everybody. This might be a shorter episode. My apologies on that. But this Friday, Dr. Robin McCutcheon is going to be joining us again, and we're going to talk about all things Marshall, all things money, and a number of other happenings that are taking place, of course, around the world. So make sure and stay tuned for that as well. We haven't had the discussion yet, of course, but we certainly will, and then I will make that immediately available on Thursday evening. With that said, let me dive into this very quickly here. First of all, there are a couple of happenings regarding social media platforms. Of course, just the other day, X was down and Rumble was down, and everybody was blaming cyber attacks and a number of other things, which is all highly possible. It also could have been a trap to catch certain individuals. Who's really to say? With that aside for just a second now, let me get to this. This is from Justice Report on March 6th, and it was titled Free Speech Platform Telegram Deletes Public Channel with 5,000 Subscribers Without Warning. Now, as you might imagine, this particular channel was titled Holocaust.claims. Again, a pretty based channel on Telegram, and it's not, unfortunately, unusual for those channels that tell the most truth to get deleted again without warning. But let me get into the article here. Here's what it says. It says, Dubai, United Arab Emirates, Telegram has banned the public channel of Holocaust.claims, which had nearly 5,000 subscribers without giving any prior warning or explanation to its administrator. This comes despite the platform's long touting its commitment to free speech, which in the past has included refusing to comply with regional censorship laws or even copyright claims. Holocaust.claims is a blog dedicated towards providing digestible and searchable information on Holocaust revisionism. It also had a Telegram channel where it would post its articles along with commentary from the channel's administrator. It says, however, on March 4th, the administrator noticed that the channel was no longer working and subsequently that the channel was gone. The Justice Report was able to independently confirm her claims on desktop links to the channel no longer working, and instead displaying the message, sorry, this channel is not accessible. It goes on here, it says the removal of the public channel that did not violate Telegram's terms of service and the lack of transparency regarding its removal represents a troubling departure from the platform's professed commitment to free speech. Telegram played a critical role in distributing war footage from conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza, content that otherwise would not have reached Western audiences. Additionally, Telegram became a refuge for individuals censored from mainstream social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter during the peak censorship period in 2021. In recent years, Telegram has faced increased scrutiny from Western governments due to its commitment to free speech and resistance to censorship requests. Nevertheless, Telegram has often complied with censorship demands from major tech companies, notably agreeing with Apple and Google to app ban specific channels, it says, to ensure the app remains available on their app stores. However, in 2021, Telegram released a version of its Android app directly downloadable from its website, allowing users to access channels blocked by these app store restrictions. It says, since Hamas's raid on Israel, well, whatever, Telegram's censorship practices have again attracted attention. Again, long story short here, it does say this in the article, which is worth revisiting. It says, in the summer of 2024, Telegram CEO Pavel Durov was arrested in France on charges related to complicity in offenses involving the organized distribution of child pornography and drug trafficking. Again, whether that's true or not is anyone's guess. That's sort of a typical excuse for wanting to lock somebody up who has social media influence and runs a social media platform. And then they make an arrest and keep the individual behind bars, and then, again, basically do their best to try to control that particular social media platform or particular website. It says, however, this action has drawn criticism as an attack on free speech, given that Telegram maintains relatively permissive content moderation compared to other social media platforms. Durov remains restricted from leaving France pending trial or dismissal of charges. Recent reports suggest that his trial might not commence until 2026. Again, there have been other channels that have been wiped off of Telegram before. Specifically, You may recall there was a Ohio homeschooling program that had a lot of, again, very historically accurate history lessons on there, specifically pertaining to the beginning and middle and end of World War II, who was really responsible for all of that, and a variety of other subjects as well. Again, the thing to keep in mind here is that the war on censorship is a war that continues to rage here. It just continues to go on. It's not going to go away. And as long as the Jewish lobby is around, and we don't have free speech, of course, in foreign countries, they all talk about it, but they don't clearly have it because they're locking people up for engaging in such free speech. But if, again, they think that it's offensive to somebody, well, then they lock these people up and throw away the key. Fortunately, there's always been Gab. And again, I've complimented Gab numerous times, and rightfully so. Same thing with Andrew Torba. He's really doing a fantastic job over there. And he received this letter the other day as well. This was from March 10th. It says, Gab gets censorship demands from Israelis. Let me read you his response here. And he also, of course, includes the letter that he received from this particular group, but his response is very well done. He says the following, quote, Gab community, I want to share with you a letter we received from an organization called Fighting Online Antisemitism, or FOA. This is Israel-based group has informed us that their intention to publish a report about alleged anti-Semitic content on Gab. It says in their letter, they have the audacity to demand that we work with them to censor speech they deem unacceptable, just as they are about to publish a report smearing our community. Let me be clear. Jews in the foreign national state of Israel are not immune to criticism, mockery, or scorn. Every other group of people on this planet faces the realities of being offended, and they can too. There are plenty of posts on the internet, even on my own website, that I find highly offensive as a Christian, but I do what any grown adult man would do, keep scrolling or use the block button when necessary. I don't need some foreign special interest group dictating what I see online. Gab is the only platform that doesn't fall for these tricks, and rather demands for censorship, especially not from foreigners. We could not stand strong against such pressure without the unwavering support from our community. As we continue our mission to defend free speech online from all threats, both foreign and domestic, I asked you to consider upgrading to Gab Pro or making a donation to support our cause. Okay. He goes on. He says, in summary, the letter from FOA states that they're preparing to publish a report about anti-Semitic content on Gab. They demand collaboration to combat anti-Semitism, quote-unquote, on our platform. They want to establish clear community guidelines, quote-unquote, that allow for the moderation of extremist content and harmful incitement, quote-unquote. And then prior to the publication of their report, they invite us to join their fight against online anti-Semitism. Andrew Torba said the following, our response to them was a simple 2-word email, get bent, unquote. Gab will not bend to the demands of foreign actors seeking to undermine our commitment to free speech. We will continue to provide a platform where everyone's voice can be heard regardless of their beliefs or opinions. Thank you for your continued support in our fight for free speech online. Andrew Torba, CEO of Gab AI Inc. Christ is King. There you go. Okay. The simple reason that I mention this is just because this is an ongoing thing. As long as the Israeli lobby continues to exist, there's always going to be negative influence. As long as there are foreign countries that have laws on the books that are all for penalizing individuals who criticize Jews or Israel or anything that they do, they're always going to try to seek influence within the United States, even with free and open companies like Gab. Or even, again, like Telegram, which of course is not an American company by any stretch of the imagination, but even so, free speech, again, does get to exist in our country, and depending on, again, the individual running the particular company, well, they're ultimately the ones that decide. It's not foreign governments, again, it's not lobbyists, influence peddlers, whoever, whatever title you want to use or whatever name you want to use for these individuals, they're not really the ones that have the say. Ultimately, it boils down to how thick is the spine of the individual who runs the company. and what, again, are they willing to stand for and stand up against. So I just mentioned that briefly because, again, these are ongoing fights that always exist. We know that X is not a free speech platform by and large. They have lots of ways of censoring content. They have lots of ways of making sure that your messages don't get to the people that apparently follow you, and a number of other things. Shadow banning, whatever, again, terms you want to use. Of course, they kick people off as well for saying particular things that they don't like, breaks our terms of service, this, that, and the other. Terms of service are different from the Constitution, and that's the sad part. So, again, like Andrew Torba said, if you don't like a particular post, keep scrolling. If you don't like the words that somebody uses, just keep scrolling or block them, and you'll never have to worry about it ever again. So, there you go. Pretty simple stuff. But even so, it's a war, and it continues to rage on here. Okay, let me mention this now. Thomas Massie and Donald Trump are apparently going back and forth, certainly based on a couple of posts that have been made. There's a continuing resolution vote to continue to fund the government, which is set to take place today, which is on Tuesday when I'm recording this. This is an interesting back and forth on a multi-dimensional level, and unfortunately, it's very predictable that a lot of, again, individuals on social media, and certainly these individuals with much larger accounts, certainly larger than mine, are looking at this at face value because they can't think multidimensionally about anything, and they typically don't. They just bounce back and forth from one side to the other. They criticize the president. They criticize this person or that person, and then they just say, well, the way that I see it is the way that it is. That's not thinking. That's just emotional reacting. So let's think about this a little bit and understand that this is multidimensional. Ask yourself a couple of questions, just very outright, right at the very beginning. Again, very multidimensional, very straightforward. Do you think that Donald Trump is a bad person? Answer that question for yourself. Now ask yourself this question. Do you think that Thomas Massie is a bad person? If you said no to both of those things, then that's right where, again, a wavelength of thought needs to exist. So if the answer is no to both of those, at a face value, one-dimensional wavelength of thought, then understand that there's probably something else that's taking place here. We know for a fact that Senator Mitch McConnell's seat in Kentucky is officially vacant. And Thomas Massie could certainly run for that Senate seat, and he would win it with his eyes closed and half of his brain tied behind his back. Massie is a constitutionalist. He is a staunch conservative. He's an American first individual, and the people who vote for him in Kentucky know this. They know it. Again, anybody running for senator in Kentucky without voter fraud against Thomas Massie would lose because Thomas Massie would win. They're not likely to vote for a black in Kentucky. They're not likely to vote for a woman in Kentucky. Rand Paul is the other senator right now in Kentucky. He stays put. He remains. If Massie were to take McConnell's seat, Massie would be in the Senate, thereby, again, holding that particular Senate seat firmly, certainly more firmly than Mitch McConnell would, because he sways with the wind and votes left by and large, and certainly has in many cases, and for his own interests, which again begs the question, do you think that Massie has his own interests, or can he not be bought? Well, he can't be bought. He doesn't take any AIPAC money, and again, at one-dimensional face value, everybody knows that. So Massie isn't the bad guy here. But neither is Donald Trump either. And this is the part, again, that makes some on the right lose their minds, and then they start name-calling and, Zion, Don, and all this other stuff. There's more to this, I think, than what people can possibly imagine. So let me break this down a couple of different ways. First of all, Donald Trump kicked it off with a particular post on on Truth Social, my apologies. He doesn't post his posts, by the way, that he posts on Truth Social. He doesn't make those same posts on X. Other people will move those posts around, but either way, he typically doesn't do that. Here's the post that he made. He said, quote, "Thank you to the House Freedom Caucus for just delivering a big blow to the radical left Democrats and their desire to raise taxes or shut our country down. They hate America and all it stands for. That's why they allowed millions of criminals to invade our nation. Sometimes it takes great courage to do the right thing. Congressman Thomas Massie of beautiful Kentucky is an automatic no vote on just about everything, despite the fact that he has always voted for continuing resolutions in the past. He should be primaried. That's all in bold letters. And then it says, and I will lead the charge against him. He's just another grandstander who's too much trouble and not worth the fight. He reminds me of Liz Cheney before her historic, record-breaking fall, and then in loss, parentheses. It says, the people of Kentucky won't stand for it, just watch. Do I have any takers? 3 question marks. Anyway, thank you again to the House Freedom Caucus for your very important vote. We need to buy some time in order to make America great again, greater than ever before. Unite and win, unquote. Okay. First of all, when he says the following, when he says, sometimes it takes great courage to do the right thing, and then in the next line he mentions Massie being a no vote, we know again that we know what Massie is voting for at face value based on the continuing resolution. If he's voting no, he's voting for less spending. He's voting for basically not having $2 trillion go back on top of the already existing budget and putting us $2 trillion further into debt. Now again, does Thomas Massie know all of the ins and outs of the operation that's taking place here? I don't know if he does or he doesn't. I'm not saying I know all the ins and outs either. But what I know is that in September, this very vote is going to have to happen again. So again, what happens when that's the case? I'm not entirely sure. I don't want to think that far ahead quite yet, but when I saw this exchange back and forth, I honestly thought of one particular sort of litmus test example, and I remember this, and I remember where I was when I actually heard Rush Limbaugh say this. I remember when Donald Trump entered office, he ended up passing a bill and signing it into law that basically funded the military. And it was a ton of money. I mean, it was trillions, but it was an absolute ton of money. And when it happened, Rush Limbaugh basically said, I feel like we're being betrayed. I feel like we're being stabbed in the back right now because the military-industrial complex is getting more money. Hopefully we're not going to war. Donald Trump ran on fiscal responsibility. I thought that, this wasn't supposed to happen and XYZ. Even Rush Limbaugh back then was looking at it at face value and commenting on it at face value. And we were all, again, kind of just sitting around going, well, that seems kind of odd. Why would he fund so much money to the military? What is it that's been going on with the military? And that right there is where all the questions stopped being asked. Because what was really happening with the military, which was classified information which wasn't being discussed publicly, certainly not at the time, was that when Obama was in office, he was defunding the military. He was limiting the military. He was selling off military parts and pieces to God knows where. He was destroying the military to where we had no defense. We didn't have defenses in foreign countries, which of course would have allowed us to be attacked in a foreign country, thereby starting a war. Or the same exact thing, of course, happening in our country. But that right there wasn't one of the things that Donald Trump was discussing at the time when he was signing this into law and signing that particular bill into law because, again, he really couldn't. He couldn't stand up in front of everybody and say, the entire time that Obama was in office, he was depleting our military on purpose for the purposes of us getting attacked. The reason I mention that is because there's always more going on. It's never just a face value, well, this is the way that it is. And let's just look at this back and forth social media banter from the second and third hand commentators and we'll just believe them. Old Zion Don is back at it again. I don't believe that. There's always more happening here. So let me just read you again some of the responses here from Thomas Massie. Here's what he said on March 10th. before this particular post from Donald Trump went out. He said the argument for continuing resolution in September 2024 was to fight in December 2024 after the election. The argument for continuing resolution in December of 2024 was to fight in March of 2025 after the inauguration. The argument for continuing resolution in March 2025 is to fight in September 2025 because we're not ready yet. And then he put question mark, exclamation point. He says, if this passes this week, in another post, the CR obligates Trump from now until September to spend the same amount of money on generally the same things Biden spent money on in his last 15 months in office. We could pass rescissions later to undo some things, but there's no commitment to do so. He goes on in another post where he's responding to Tucker Carlson, and he says, the military-industrial complex demands about $50 billion per year in war. As soon as we quit spending $50 billion per year in Afghanistan, we started spending $50 billion per year in Ukraine. Watch where the next $50 billion per year goes when we stop sending it to Ukraine. The military-industrial complex is always hungry. He then goes on and again responds to Rand Paul, where Rand Paul says, despite Doge's findings of loony left-wing USAID programs, the Republican spending bill continues to fund the very foreign aid at Elon Musk proposes to cut. The bill continues spending at the inflated pandemic levels and will add $2 trillion to the debt this year. Count me as a hell no. And then again, he includes an article from the Economic Times describing it further. And again, Thomas Massie responds, and he says, Rand is correct, I'm a no as well on this CR. And then regarding Trump's post, Massie said the following here. He said, someone thinks they can control my voting card by threatening my election, or my re-election rather. He said, guess what? Doesn't work on me. 3 times I've had a challenger who tried to be more MAGA than me. None busted 25% because my constituents prefer transparency and principles over blind allegiance, unquote. There are multiple lessons here in this back and forth. Number 1, the Great Awakening has to do with individuals realizing that yes, blind allegiance is a problem. And you can't have it. You should certainly, of course, have it for Jesus and hopefully your loving family members. But beyond that, there just needs to be analysis and thinking and critical thought about what's actually transpiring here. It's also fully possible that Thomas Massie doesn't understand the bigger picture regarding what Trump has in store and what the military has in store. I understand there would be people, of course, who would say, well, that's not true. That there is no plan, that nothing is happening, and that there's no way that a congressman, let alone one from Kentucky, would be out of the loop on what's actually transpiring here. The fact is, many of the people doing the voting have no idea what they're really voting for. They're being used in all of this also. As again, this particular money is going to be used a particular way. And again, there is no doubt that copious amounts of money are going to be brought back to the United States. These individuals, again, you can't take back a country by telling everybody what you're going to do when you want to do it, and tell them every single step of the plan or the policy, and then expect it all to work out in the end, because everybody, again, will try to sabotage things. It is the art of war. You have to use deception, and you have to make it look like you're against certain people when in fact you aren't. But there's also no way that congressmen and women know everything that's transpiring here, and same thing with senators. They don't know what the hell's going on. They don't know what the larger picture is anyway, because again, a lot of them are blackmailed and they're bought and sold. Again, Tucker Carlson just admitted the other day that he fully knows for a fact and is fully aware, and he was having a conversation with Chris Cuomo, God knows why, because he's useless. But either way, openly saying that Senator Tom Cotton is bought and sold, and that he's on the Foreign Relations Committee or whatever the hell committee he's on for the sole purpose of basically slow-rolling information having to do with Israel and making sure that people don't find out all of the Israeli connections that exist. That's why he openly says he's a Zionist. in any of these senatorial hearings like he did when he was asking questions to Pete Hegseth, and looked at Pete Hegseth and was like, "Are you a Zionist? Because I am, and here's what that means to me." Again, these people show themselves as to who they really are. You can see the different wavelengths of thought. It's not black or white. It's not one or the other always. In the case of Tom Cotton, yeah, it's pretty crystal clear as to who he serves, and it's not America. I mean, they have him touching kids or doing something to somebody, but it's disgusting whatever it is. They've got him blackmailed to the bone. But they don't have Thomas Massie. And Thomas Massie was also, of course, on Tucker Carlson's show very famously talking about AIPAC and how everybody has an AIPAC handler and you have to plagiarize or write a particular letter saying, again, that you stand with Israel and their right to exist and blah, blah, blah. He's not playing that game because he's actually a real representative working for the people of Kentucky as best he can, I suppose, and certainly defending the people from Kentucky from having to pay more based on federal policy. But it's also highly possible that Thomas Massie doesn't know that there's a larger play at hand here and that there are bigger cards being played. This is, again, highly possible. It's not that Rand Paul is a bad person. It's not that Thomas Massie is a bad person. It's not even that Donald Trump is either. It's just that there's multiple wars taking place right now, not just foreignly, but domestically. Now, let me get into this too, because I think this matters. Because misspellings matter. In a Q post, which is Q post 831, on March 3rd of 2018, it says the following. Very brief, very straight to the point. It says, quote, "Where we go one, we go all. Misspellings matter. Sentence formation matters. Learn. Q." Unquote. Misspellings matters, and that phrase is in at least 3 Q posts, where it's, again, highlighting particular tweets, back then certainly, that Donald Trump was making where he would misspell something, or the person, i.e. military person or whomever, who's posting the particular post would misspell something. This is going to be a stretch for some, but for those of us who have been watching this and paying attention to this for, not quite 10 years, but it feels like it's getting close to that, a lot of these particular posts that get made by Donald Trump are, of course, not him making them, and they are coded to some extent. There are particular clues that you can find within some of these posts. So again, keep in mind, misspellings matter. In the post about Massie, he misspells Liz Cheney's name. Cheney is spelled Cheney. He spells it Chaney. So the A doesn't belong. Now here's what I did. And again, other people caught the misspelling, but I decided to take it a step further, which is a step that other people have also taken regarding past posts, but I remembered that you can actually do this. Given the fact that the letter A doesn't belong there, I got on the keyboard and I typed in the letter A, and then I put brackets around it. Because in some cases, based on past Q posts, again, I understand this is a stretch for some, and that's fine. It gets to be. People don't get to understand this, and I'm not delusional. But if you type in a lowercase a and you put 2 brackets around it, as again is highlighted in many Q posts, that when that's done for a specified letter that usually, as it turns out, correlates with a misspelling. In this case, it's rather interesting. If you, again, type in the letter A with 2 brackets around it, there's at least 2 posts that pop up. The first one is April 2nd of 2018, but April 2nd, again, is the month and the day. Let me read this first before I get into the April 2nd thing. It says April at the very top, and then it says, again, the letter A in a bracket. It says IG report, Sessions public attack, RR problems, which I believe stood for Rod Rosenstein. It says seals broken. And then A again is in a bracket, and it says arrests. It says, why was Huber made public? Why now? Everything has meaning. And then it says Awan with A in brackets also. It says tarmac, Iran, North Korea, Uranium One, FBI, DOJ, Mueller, election integrity, immigration bill, border, wall, military start, big month. Big is capitalized, and then it says Q, unquote. So that's a lot in that post, which is interesting. But it's April 2nd is the date of this post. If you've been listening to Donald Trump recently in the Oval Office and in other talks he's been giving, one of the things that he does, which is a very interesting, again, it's not a tick, it's a very purposeful communication strategy. And the media doesn't pick up on it, and they certainly don't comment on it. It's when he makes a comment, and I brought this up on the show before, but he makes a comment that seems vague and out of place, and not a single media person follows up with a follow-up question about what does that mean. So, for example, he's mentioned in the past, and he'll even reference Marco Rubio in this. He'll look at Marco and be like, right, Marco, we're going to lose a lot of money. He says, we had it slated for tariffs or whatever else, and he's very vague about what else he means, for April 1st. And he says, but we're going to hold off a day, and we're going to make it April 2nd. He says things like, it's going to cost us a lot of money that one day, but we're going to hold it off to April 2nd because I'm very superstitious, he says. Again, assuming that he's referencing April Fool's Day or something along those lines. But again, people just sort of chuckle it off. And he says it repeatedly, time and time and time again, but no one asks why. What exactly, Mr. President, is going to happen on April 2nd? What is going to take place? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by you're superstitious, and what exactly, again, is going to transpire on April 2nd that you don't want to happen on April 1st? I find all of this communication remarkably interesting, is essentially what I'm trying to say, and that's a big post that says a lot of different stuff. Now, on April 3rd, the very next day, which is Q Post 995, it says the following: future proves past, several today. And then in brackets, it says 1 day, the number 1 and then the word day. It says Rod Rosenstein, RR, assuming that's what that stands for, military, border. It says keep watching the news. And then the letter A is in brackets, and it spells out the word April. And then it says MOAB, mother of all bombs, Q. Again, misspelling Liz Cheney's name is not an accident. It is an on purpose. And we've been told that these misspellings matter, and we've been told that there are communications that are taking place in these posts that are deeper than what people can possibly imagine. So here's where I come out on this. I'm not worried about Thomas Massie. I'm not worried about Donald Trump. They're going to do just fine. They don't need Rand Paul's vote on a continuing resolution. They don't need Thomas Massie's vote on a continuing resolution. You can have these other individuals again voting for it because Donald Trump says, please vote for it, and then all of those people just vote for it, not knowing what they're actually voting for, not knowing that they might be voting for a bigger operation that's actually taking place that's set again to unfold in the coming months here. Now, there's also this, and I want to play this for you too. This is John Harold, again, of Badlands Media. And here's what he says again regarding sort of this back and forth. He says, I don't care whether you like Massie or not, just be consistent. Many people gave me shit for criticizing Massie in the past. Now y'all hate me too because Trump said so. There is nothing principled about that. If your standards are changing because you need to wait for permission from Trump's social media, then you don't actually have standards and you're just a sheep. Don't be a sheep. I'm also very much wanting the shutdown of the government. And then he said this, and he linked a particular video that he recorded here having to do with who actually controls or chooses which bills get paid and which government agencies get funded if the government shuts down. As it turns out, it's Doge. Because the guy who used to be in charge of the Treasury was fighting the whole Doge concept and wasn't allowing Elon Musk to enter. And so he was cut loose at the beginning of January of this year. Point being, Doge is the Treasury, and the head of the Treasury is actually Donald Trump, believe it or not. And there was an article that was written, I believe, even back in Bloomberg, describing that theoretically and technically speaking, the head of the Treasury is in fact Donald Trump. But give John Harold a listen, again, regarding this, and the individual who used to be in charge of the Treasury, and then, of course, specifically where the money goes and where the bills get spent. But now, again, he's basically saying, because Doge has access to the Treasury and all of this is under the purview of the executive branch of government, Doge would basically be the group deciding what money goes where when if the government were to shut down. So give him a listen in 3, 2, 1.
The highest-ranking Treasury official, David A. Lebrick, is resigning rather than complying with a request by Doge for access to audit where they've spent trillions of dollars a year. The official, a career civil servant named David Lebrick, was put on leave and then suddenly retired on Friday after the dispute, according to people familiar with his exit. The system could give the Trump administration another mechanism to attempt to unilaterally restrict disbursement of money approved for specific purposes by Congress, a push that has faced legal roadblocks. Mr. Lebrick, right? That's this guy. And this is an article from 2023. And I think you'll see where I'm going with this once I start reading through this. The man in charge of knowing when the U.S. runs out of money. He is the guy that's most responsible for figuring out how the United States should handle the alarming prospect of running out of money, making him pivotal, if lesser known, player in the debt ceiling standoff consuming Washington. Again, 2023. This is why they took this over. I think they're planning to default. If the deal falls through and Congress fails to raise the debt limit in time, Lebrick will likely be at the center of deciding how to structure the payments the government can still make. Treasury would be in the unprecedented circumstance of having to choose which checks to cut. It would be up to him and his team to prepare options of which bills to pay for. Okay, so I want to do a little flashback. Okay, but before she left, Janet Yellen sent this letter to congressional leadership regarding the debt limit. I write to keep you apprised of actions the Treasury Department is taking in regard to the debt limit. These are the extraordinary measures they're taking to keep the government afloat, and they're going to run out of money on March 14th. The period of time that extraordinary measures may last is subject to considerable uncertainty, including the challenges of forecasting the payments and receipts of the U.S. government months to the future. The person right now in charge of determining where we spend our money if we reach our debt limit and run out of money is the guy that just left. This guy. When we run out of money, this guy's the guy who decides what gets paid, what bills get paid. And now Doge took that over. If we were to default, on top of all the corruption stuff going on, and I have a few more things I want to get to with USAID, but if we are set on that path, Doge is going to be the one now that decides what bills get paid. I can't think of a better way to show people what government agencies are completely unnecessary than having the government run out of money, and what money you do spend is only on certain things. And you can stop spending money on all the irrelevant ones that we don't need and just show people like, yeah, we haven't funded this thing for 6 months and you have felt no tangible impact from that government or that agency essentially not existing.
And Democrats themselves would be the ones voting for it. They would be voting for the thing they don't want without knowing that they're voting for the thing that they don't want. They think they're voting against this because it increases spending. Money goes to things that they don't want it to go to, like border wall security and a number of other things. But also just because Donald Trump wants it and Republicans want it. But if it doesn't pass, they lose too. So it doesn't matter. It's lose-lose for Democrats both ways. And it's lose-lose for Republicans who don't really know what's going on either. As I've said before, right now you've got a great deal of Republicans real tight-lipped about Doge. They're not bringing it up. Why? Because they're wrapped up in it just like the left is. Both sides have been robbing us blind with our tax dollars since the beginning of time. That's just a fact. But they're not bringing it up because they're panicked as shit. I mean, they want nothing to do with Doge. They just don't. And even when they compliment it, they very nervously do so. And speaking of nervous, even Elon Musk is nervous when it comes to answering questions about Doge. He was on Fox News the other day with Larry Kudlow, and Kudlow was asking him, like, look, you're a billionaire. Like, why did you do this? You didn't have to do this. And he gets real tight-lipped, and his head drops and his eyes go down, and he's searching for an answer. Normally, the answer would roll right off of your tongue if you were interested in telling the truth and you knew exactly what that was. Me personally, my take, it's just my opinion, I think Elon Musk is owned. I think he's been compromised by good guys. His fraud has been well known for a very long time. God knows what he's really been mixed up with. I really have no idea. I mean, we know that there's, again, past company fraud, whether that have to do with Tesla itself or PayPal or, the other adventures he's had and wherever that's led him. But even so, I still don't think, again, that he was the one who purchased Twitter. I think our government purchased it. I think that X is now completely compromised in the sense that it was taken away from bad elements of our government like the CIA, where, of course, they were probably using USAID money to help pay for it and continue to run it while they censor people. And while they, again, just plow home their own messaging and brainwash people using social media. But at the same time, I just think that Musk is a figurehead. I don't think he's actually in charge of anything. He's certainly not in charge of any engineering that's taking place. He's not building anything. There isn't anything about him that screams that he's a builder. He's a manager and a facilitator, and he's just a figurehead. He's a guy, again, who, I don't know, sits on a board and makes the occasional call or asks a particular question. I just think there's more going on here. And again, he was sort of dodging the question and dodging the answer because, again, he can't really tell people. He can't really tell people what's really taking place here. So again, it's not face value. I'm just going to leave it at that. There's way more going on here. But just don't get caught up in the emotional back and forth of everything. That's that's low-hanging fruit, low ball thinking where really there is no thinking taking place. I'm not worried about Massie. I'm not worried about Trump. I'm not even worried about the debt or the money. I think that we don't have debt. I think that trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars debt clock, I think it's a lie. I think the whole thing is just constantly a lie, and it's totally manipulated just to scare people, just like the stock market. Stock market's a lie. It's completely controlled by human beings. It's not controlled by actual influx of worth this way or the other. They try to normalize, for example, that what people say about particular things impacts the stock market in one way or another. If that's true, if that were really true, and that had some impact on buying and selling of particular products, commodities, what have you, then it would just be, if they wanted to crash the stock market, they could do it overnight by just making chaos reign on a week-long basis every single day, and then the stock market would be at zero. But they're not doing that because it's controlled by a human. So I think there's good things coming. I'm not panicked or worried about anything. That's my 2 cents on all of it. Now let me mention this, education related. This, of course, is an ongoing thing. I find it absolutely hilarious that even individuals, again, can't see beyond face value of what this actually is. You've probably heard again of this Columbia University activist, and this is important, who is not a student on the campus. Has apparently, again, been either detained or, again, arrested by ICE agents here, facing potential deportation, but a federal judge has basically intervened, again, the ongoing civil war, has intervened and said that you can't detain him because, again, that breaks, constitutional rights and XYZ, and you need to let him go and whatever else. This doesn't spark some free speech controversy here. You have an individual who isn't a student of the university showing up on this particular university campus, which, as we know, is a safe haven for Marxists, communists, and the like. And there are Marxists and communists on the right and the left, regardless of how they dress or what their skin color is or what have you. They're predominantly left, but there are plenty on the right. The fact is you have this Muhammad Khalil is his name, again, apparently advocating for Palestinian rights, which is fine. The problem is he's trespassing. He's showing up on a college campus where he's not supposed to be. He's not a student, and he's organizing other students to ultimately, again, trespass and engage in disorderly conduct. This has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, quote unquote. It has nothing to do with that. That's all the cover story. That's all you're pro-Jew and, this anti-Semitism isn't real. And Donald Trump said anti-Semitism in a post. So that must be what all of this is about. It's not. It's about keeping people off of college campuses who are organizing gullible, stupid students and individuals who are not a part of that university in the slightest to engage in crime on those university campuses. That's it. It's that simple. You can't barricade doors. You can't walk into a lecture when someone's conducting a class setting and you're wrapped up in your sheets and your masks and you're doing whatever, throwing out flyers and pamphlets and holding up signs. And, you can't do that. You just can't. If you want to walk down the street and you want to hold a sign or you want to wave a flag, while you're not being stationary and blocking people and getting in the way and not engaging in disorderly conduct, that's fine. That's not against the law. That's freedom of speech, freedom of expression. But when you're standing on property that's not yours and you're not even a student there, you're trespassing. And if you keep coming back, then that's criminal trespass. So, yeah, again, if he's an illegal and he's breaking the law, he should go home. Just like any illegal who's breaking the law, they should go home. It's not complicated. The problem is people are twisting it into it being a quote-unquote anti-Semitic fight back and forth. More Jewish rights, less Palestinian rights. It has nothing to do with that. That's not it. In fact, if these individuals, again, who are paying attention to this low-hanging fruit and misconstruing that entire story, they want to pay attention again to a real story. They should pay attention to the Christian Syrians that are being crucified in Syria, literally. That's more of a story. That's more of something that somebody should be able to digest at face value, and then, of course, understand the underpinnings of that entire takeover of that country, and that it's basically, again, Jews and radical Muslims funding one another to destroy Christians and to wipe them out. Now, do you see the parallel there between that and what goes on in college campuses? It's Jews and radical Muslims doing the exact same thing. They fund one another to create and foment chaos or the perception of division. And then, of course, they get the gullible in order to participate because those are the Marxists and those are the useful idiots. And then they're participating again in their own downfall. Now, the interim, to get back to the Columbia thing very quickly, the interim president, her last name is Armstrong. They don't have a full-time president right now. I guarantee the next one will probably be Jewish. That was the case at Harvard. They kicked out the Harvard president and they replaced her with a Jew. Okay. Now what? Anti-Semitism is still taking place on university campuses with a Jew at the helm. You would think that people would pay attention to something like that. But again, at Columbia, the lady's not Jewish, but she'll probably get replaced. I mean, that's what's going to happen. They've already lost apparently tens of millions of dollars now as a result of not cracking down on so-called anti-Semitism, but that's not the thing that they need to crack down on. The thing they're cracking down on really is just illegality. Let me give you an example. This is Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib, again, complete nutbag, But she says the following, quote, "I'm joining 13 of my colleagues to demand that the Trump administration immediately release Mahmoud Khalil. Their illegal actions set a dangerous precedent. We cannot allow them to shred our constitutional rights to free speech and due process. Free Mahmoud Khalil," unquote. Again, it has nothing to do with constitutional rights, freedom of speech, or due process. It has to do with an individual who doesn't live there, who doesn't belong there, who isn't a student there, organizing individuals to break the law. They can protest whatever they want. What they can't do is organize individuals to break the law on property that is not theirs, that they don't pay to attend. It wouldn't be any different, for example, somebody walking off of the street into a working environment and then getting all of the workers to protest within that working environment on that work site on that property. You would arrest that person because you would say, "Do you go to school here?" They go, "Well, no." "Do you work here?" "Well, no." Then you're gone. And if you come back, you're trespassing. This is not hard. It has nothing to do with anti-Semitism. It has nothing to do with protecting Jews. It has nothing to do with protecting Palestinians. It has to do with just American law. And as we know, it goes way deeper than that. You have staff members who are working for the CIA. You have police departments that are working with those staff members for the CIA to allow certain laws to be broken to then, of course, continue to play the victim. So, yeah, it's a multi-dimensional war. It's not 1D chess here. It never is. Now, shifting gears here to education just very quickly. The former head of the National Teachers Education Association, Randi Weingartner, she, of course, is a complete lunatic. I play at least a 7-minute clip of her talking in the last war video. You can go and check that out if you're interested. Again, it's all over emotional nonsense. There's no facts being told. Her grift is over. The entire jig is up. She's, again, just screaming about shutting down the Department of Education and what that would mean, and we're going to lose money, and everybody's going to die, and no one's going to get an education, and children will suffer, and blah, 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 blah. None of that's true. Absolutely none of it. But as I said in the last episode, having Donald Trump force states to actually do what they need to do, they're actually being tricked into being self-sustaining and self-sufficient. And again, this is the one thing they've never wanted to do. They've always wanted to depend on government and depend on NGOs and national education associations, rather, for influence, money, direction, and everything else. Again, these people make work like nobody's business. But there's a quick little clip here from a different discussion, certainly one, again, that Randi Weingarten was having, and it was on a podcast or a show apparently here on YouTube called Fast Politics with Molly Jung Fast. This was an 18-minute discussion, and I'm not going to play the full 18 minutes, but I want to play approximately the last 3 minutes. And old Randy lets the cat out of the bag here when it comes to exactly why she's afraid that the United States Department of Education would be eliminated potentially in the future. Certainly, as I've said in the past, and I said again in the last Substack, the executive order helps, and it's good fertilizer to ultimately, again, create a vote. But at the end, you would still need 60 or 61 some odd votes within the Senate in order to pass it eventually and abolish it completely. The real reason, of course, is they don't want the money to dry up. They don't want their cash cow to go away. And that would bother them greatly because, again, when you stop the money flow, you have to see where the money's been going and who it's been going to. And she should be afraid because when people find out it's child trafficking, they're going to lose their minds. So here's the last few minutes of their worthless discussion in 3, 2, 1.
But what happens is the Department of Education is the one who metes out the money. The Congress appropriates it, but the department metes it out. So what these guys want to do is they want to say either take that money away and give it to tax cuts for the wealthy. So take it from the poor and give it to the rich.
Right.
Or equally pernicious, they're saying, oh, don't worry, let's block grant it. So we'll give it to a state education department.
Right.
So, and then let the state education department decide what to do. So we know, for example, what Texas would do.
Right.
They'll use it
We
for
do.
vouchers. So they
Yeah.
won't give it to the kids who have it now. They'll just give it for vouchers.
Catholic schools,
And,
religious
well,
schools.
And frankly, what we're seeing in all the programs that are now extant in terms of vouchers, they don't work for kids. They basically go right now. It becomes a tax credit for people who already are sending their kids to private schools. So it's income redistribution. So that's what they're trying to do. It's essentially income redistribution. Take from the poor, give to people who don't need it.
And then part of the Department of Education are Pell Grants, right?
Yes.
Explain to us what Pell Grants are.
So the big formula funding. So the reason I keep on saying formula funding is because the state can't get its mitts on this money. It can't say, oh, I want the Title I money so I can buy Bibles in schools. You can't do that. It's formula funding for specific purposes for kids who are poor, kids who are disabled, for kids whose families can't afford college. So they get basically a Pell Grant to go to college. So, and a Pell Grant is not, the cost of Harvard. A Pell Grant is a couple of $1,000s. So it can help you go to a community college. And the same in terms of, so there's about 12 million kids who get Pell Grants. There's about 26 million kids who get this Title I funding. There's about 7.5 million who gets the IDA funding. And, we shouldn't have this alphabet land of funding. But what it is we shouldn't have these names. But what these are specific funding streams that go for a specific purpose to help specific kids have opportunity.
Thank you, Randy Weingarten.
You're welcome. Thank you.
She said, take from the poor and give it to the rich. That's not what this is about. It's from taking from the corrupt and giving it to the people. That's it. Not complicated. You're taking it out of the hands of a giant government NGO, which is exactly what the Department of Education is, and all of their partner NGOs, which are international, including foreign agencies, of which, again, American K-12 school teachers and administrators can't even fathom what those groups do. Move children. But even so, it's about taking money away from them. It would be like destroying the only bank in town. Where is everybody else then going to bank? Well, they're just going to have to get a safe. And they're going to have to manage their own money at home. And that's the way that it's just going to be. Again, you take away the massive environment that has been stealing taxpayer money and receiving, again, all of this grant money, which is taxpayer money and government money. When you take all of that away for all the games, gimmicks, social engineering, perversion, child trafficking, everything that's been taking place, all of this goes back to the states, which means now what? The states have a decision to make. School choice or continue the grift at the local level. The schools that allow, or the states rather, that allow for school choice and allow the money to make its way back to families. That's perfect. Who would vote for, who would vote against that? I've said it before here, who would vote against a family receiving thousands of dollars a year to put toward their child's K-12 education, in particular, if they want to put that K-12 education under their own roof, in their own home, like using a Becca. A Becca doesn't cost thousands of dollars a year, which means you have all of that money for the very next year. So then once the next year rolls around, not only do you have the money that you saved from the previous year, but you end up getting more money the next year, or the same amount, for that upcoming year that you get to spend again on your children. It's like you basically having a separate educational savings account for your own kids. Now, yeah, that depends on the state in which a person lives in. You can pretty much bank that California is never going to allow that and they're going to steal it. But what does that mean about California children then? It means that they're going to get the short end of the stick. They're not going to get good education. They're going to be brainwashed. And other people in other states are just going to be wiser and smarter about the world that they live in because they weren't subjected to government indoctrination. It's a huge fight going forward. It's a big, big deal. But I love it. Because again, when you turn the lights on, the cockroaches all come out of all the cracks and they start running around, and they don't want to be exposed. Because then they have to get in front of a microphone and justify them keeping their grift around. And when they do that, they let the cat out of the bag every single time. I love it. She's been running to microphones left and right, and she's stepping in it. And she sounds like an over-emotional nutbag who has no idea about what freedom really means. Freedom to read what you want, when you want. Freedom to write what you want, when you want. Freedom to view what you want, when you want. Freedom to listen to what you want and where you want and when you want. They don't like this. That's why K-12 schools censor. It's why they keep cell phones away from them, one of many reasons. Again, it's why they don't allow for social media for certain individuals, one of many reasons, of course. But again, if you say anything in a K-12 school or university setting that goes against what people perceive to be the mainstream wavelength of thought on a particular topic, you're ostracized and you're cast out as a leper. And that's completely ridiculous. That's not the way that America is supposed to operate. It's not supposed to be filtered through NGOs, think tanks, and child trafficking organizations who socially engineer on purpose for a living. It's a sad state of affairs, but again, the house of cards is crumbling, and I love it. I'm going to end on this note very quickly. Secretary Kennedy over at HHS apparently just had a meeting with consumer brand CEOs of Kraft Heinz, General Mills, Tyson Foods, Kellogg's, Smuckers, and Pepsi Incorporated. And they said, on advancing food safety and radical transparency to protect the health of all Americans, especially our children, we will strengthen consumer trust by getting toxins out of our food. Let's make America healthy again. Yeah. This is one of those things where the knowledge of the American people shifts business. If these people don't take the food dyes, the GMOs, the soy, and all the nonsense, high fructose corn syrup, glyphosate, all of it, if they don't take the poisons out of foods and start making better foods, they will go bankrupt. Because the American people know too much. We know what's going on. We know what they've been doing in the past. It's going to be bad business. Killing Americans is not good business. It's good for bad guys, but it's not good for most people. Again, as a company, you would want to create a healthy product and create healthy people, because with healthy people and a healthy product, you'll have them around longer using your healthy product. That puts more money in everybody's hands. American people won't be as sick, which means they won't be spending nearly as much money on their so-called illness. And at the exact same time, the company makes money because they have a longer customer for a longer period of time. Again, I hope good stuff is happening. It seems to be, but we have to understand that not all of this is going to take place out in front for everybody to see. We want the full transparency, no doubt about it. And again, apparently there's some study being put together where they're investigating again the causes of autism and vaccination over at CDC. That would be good. But time will tell. Time will tell on all of this. People can't deny that things are different, and people can't deny that things are moving at a pace here that is highly unusual, certainly again for what we consider to be mainstream politics in our country, so to speak, and the way that our country's been running. It hasn't run like this ever before, certainly not in our lifetimes. It's highly unusual because, again, this is highly on purpose. So I think a lot of great things are coming down the line. I don't think there's any doubting that. But again, we get to keep an eye on things, and we get to call balls and strikes and criticize and analyze and do all of that. What we shouldn't do is just scream and shout that we've got it all figured out and look, this is the way that it is. Again, I don't have it all figured out. I'm trying to figure out more things. That's all I'm trying to do here. So with that said, thank you for listening as always, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Robin McCutcheon will join us on Friday. Looking forward to that as always, and we will catch you then. Peace. Thank you for listening to American Education FM. Make sure and check out AmericanEducationFM.com for more information. Take care and God bless.